November 1944. Near Aachen, Germany. An army medical lieutenant counted stretchers outside a canvas hospital tent. Rain hit the mud for 6 straight hours. Ambulances arrived every 12 minutes. The tent smelled like ether. Inside, 43 wounded Americans lay shoulder to shoulder on metal cots. A nurse cut uniforms open with bandage scissors while another marked morphine times onto cardboard tags. 2 orderlies carried a soldier missing his left boot. Nobody stopped moving. Then someone noticed the bandage. A blood-covered German field dressing lay in the center of the tent floor. One side carried a black eagle stamped in faded ink. The other side still dripped onto the canvas. Beside it, a German prisoner sat upright on a stretcher with both hands pressed against his stomach. No bandages covered the wound. No nurse touched him. One medic bent down to pick up the dressing. The nurse stopped him. "Leave it there." 3 soldiers near the entrance turned to look. One of them stepped backward into a tray of surgical tools. Metal clattered across the floor. Nobody spoke for 4 seconds. Then the lieutenant reached for the field phone beside the operating table. This is what Patton did. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the stories about World War II that expose the moments where discipline, mercy, and war collided inside a single room. James Walker, Cleveland, age 29. He'd been supervising evacuation hospitals for 14 months. He'd seen burned tank crews, frozen infantrymen, and soldiers missing both hands. But he'd never seen an Allied nurse refuse treatment inside an American field hospital. Walker stood beside a folding supply table and checked casualty numbers with a grease pencil. The hospital near Aachen had opened for 6 days. It already held 214 wounded men. Capacity was 90. 3 surgeons worked without sleep rotations. Morphine stocks dropped below 40 doses that morning. One generator powered the entire tent line. Outside, artillery still rolled across the hills east of the city. Aachen had become the first major German city attacked directly by American ground forces. By November 1944, the fighting turned every road into mud and broken stone. Ambulances needed nearly 2 hours to travel 11 miles. The German prisoner arrived shortly after 03:20 in the morning. 2 MPs carried him through the rear flap on a canvas stretcher. His grey field coat had already been cut open below the ribs. Blood soaked through the blanket underneath him. One MP handed Walker a capture tag tied with dirty string. Age: 19. Unit: unknown. Captured west of Würselen. Walker pointed toward the treatment line beside cot number 18. The nurse standing near the operating table never moved. Her name was Margaret Hale. Margaret Hale, Boston, age 31. She'd been treating combat casualties for 2 years. She'd seen shattered jaws, phosphorus burns, and soldiers bleeding through wool blankets. But she'd never seen Americans die all night while a German prisoner waited for treatment beside them. Walker looked towards her again. "Hale," he said, "bandage him." She kept sorting plasma bottles by size. There are Americans still waiting. A wounded infantryman on the nearest cot turned his head toward them. Another soldier stopped chewing morphine gum. Nobody inside the tent moved for several seconds. Walker stepped closer. "That prisoner bleeds out in 20 minutes. Hale finally looked at the German stretcher. "I spent 18 hours sewing Americans closed after Stolberg," she said. "He can wait." The German prisoner coughed blood onto his sleeve. One of the MPs reached for the discarded field dressing on the floor. Hale blocked him with her boot. "Leave it. Walker looked down at the bandage. German markings. Blood still wet. He reached for the field phone mounted beside the supply rack. At 03:41, he called Captain Robert Ellis, the hospital administrative officer stationed 400 yards away in the rear command tent. Robert Ellis, Philadelphia, age 41. He'd been coordinating frontline medical logistics for 9 months. He'd seen convoy ambushes, amputations without anesthesia, and field tents collapse under artillery fire. But he'd never seen medical treatment refused after a prisoner reached American custody. Walker spoke for less than 30 seconds. Then he looked back at the untreated prisoner while the line stayed silent. Robert Ellis arrived at the tent at 03:58 with mud covering both boots. He pushed past 2 orderlies carrying plasma crates and stopped beside the German stretcher. The prisoner still held his stomach wound shut with both hands. Ellis looked toward Hale. "You know, regulations," he said. "Prisoners get treatment after capture." Hale tied off a blood tube beside another patient. "I know the regulations." One surgeon paused beside the operating table and removed his gloves. Blood covered both wrists. Ellis stepped closer to her station. "You're refusing a direct order." She pointed towards the American cots. 8 Americans died here tonight, she said. "I watched one kid from Iowa choke on his own blood for 12 minutes. Nobody inside the tent spoke. Rain hammered the canvas roof hard enough to shake dust from the support poles. Ellis looked towards the German prisoner again. The blanket underneath him had turned dark black around the stomach wound. He dies first. This becomes murder. Hale kept folding fresh gauze into stacks. He wore the same uniform that sent those boys here. A corporal near the entrance lowered his cigarette without taking a drag. Ellis said nothing for several seconds. Then he walked outside into the rain, crossed 200 yards of mud, and went straight to Major Thomas Green. Thomas Green, Chicago, age 38. He'd been running combat hospitals for 11 months. He'd seen convoy burnings, shattered spines, and medics killed beside operating tables. But he'd never seen a prisoner treatment dispute threaten the authority of an entire evacuation unit. Green entered the hospital tent at 04:22, carrying the prisoner's capture report in one hand. 2 medics followed behind him with fresh plasma bottles. The German prisoner had grown pale. Blood reached the floor beneath the stretcher. Green unfolded the report. This prisoner carried an American private nearly 300 yards before capture. He said, "The MPs wrote it themselves." Hale did not look up. He still wore German grey. One medic stopped tightening a tourniquet and glanced toward Green. The major placed the report onto a metal tray beside Hale. "You don't get to choose who counts as human after surrender." Hale pointed toward cot number 11, where an American sergeant breathed through blood bubbles. "That man fought for us," she said. "This one fought against us." The tent stayed quiet except for the generator outside. Green rubbed 2 fingers across his jaw and looked toward Walker. "How long?" Walker checked his watch. "Maybe 15 minutes. Green looked back toward Hale. "If I force this order now, half this tent breaks discipline tomorrow." Hale said nothing. She continued wrapping fresh gauze around another soldier's burned arm. Green stared at the German prisoner for several seconds. Then he pulled a yellow incident form from his coat pocket. At 04:41, he wrote a formal refusal report under emergency medical authority and sent it to the Corps Medical Office by motorcycle courier, Colonel William Mercer, Atlanta, age 42. He'd been inspecting battlefield hospitals for 18 months. He'd seen frozen aid stations, surgeons operating by flashlight, and medics carrying bodies through artillery fire. But he'd never seen refusal of prisoner treatment spread beyond one hospital tent. Mercer received the report shortly after sunrise. 3 similar complaints already sat inside his field case. One from Stolberg, one from Eschweiler, one from a clearing station outside Düren. All involved German prisoners left untreated after surrender. Mercer drove 14 miles through rain and wrecked supply traffic before reaching the evacuation hospital near Aachen at 07:10. Inside the tent, the German prisoner still breathed. Barely. A medic wiped blood from the prisoner's mouth using an American towel. Hale stood beside the operating table preparing plasma tubes for incoming casualties. Mercer removed his gloves slowly. You understand what this becomes if every hospital copies you. Hale faced him directly for the first time. They watched Americans die all week, she said. They're tired of helping Germans live. An artillery blast rolled somewhere beyond the hills. Dust drifted down from the canvas ceiling. Mercer looked toward the rows of wounded Americans. Some stared at him from their cots. Others pretended not to listen. Then he looked back at the untreated prisoner. "If I arrest her," he said quietly to Green, "the staff turns against command. If I ignore this, the Geneva Convention becomes toilet paper." Green folded the incident report once and handed it back. Neither man moved for several seconds. Then Mercer ordered a full written report sent directly to 3rd Army headquarters. By the next morning, it was sitting on Patton's desk. Patton received the report shortly after 06:30 on November 18th, 1944. He stood beside a folding campaign desk inside a stone farmhouse outside Aachen, while rain struck the windows hard enough to rattle the glass. He read the report once, then he read the final paragraph again. His thumb stopped against the edge of the paper. The room stayed silent except for the ticking field clock beside the radio set. Patton folded the report carefully. "An American hospital left a prisoner bleeding on a stretcher," he said. "Now every damn unit watches what happens next." Captain Harold Jensen stood beside the map table holding a clipboard against his chest. Patton looked toward him. "Get my driver." Jensen hesitated. "Sir, the Corps inspectors can handle—" Patton cut him off before the sentence finished. "No." He placed the report into his coat pocket. "I want them to see me handle it." 20 minutes later, a dark green jeep rolled through the mud toward the evacuation hospital outside Aachen. Patton sat in the rear seat wearing a combat jacket darkened by rain. 4 silver stars covered his helmet. Ivory-handled revolvers rested against his belt as the jeep bounced through shell craters and supply traffic. Nobody spoke during the drive. The jeep stopped beside the hospital tents at 07:48. One orderly recognized the helmet first. Another dropped a medical crate into the mud inside the tent. Conversation stopped almost instantly. A surgeon froze with both hands inside a basin of bloody water. One wounded infantryman tried pulling himself upright on his cot before another soldier pushed him back down. Then Patton stepped through the canvas entrance. Rainwater dripped from the edge of his helmet onto the wooden floorboards. He looked once at the rows of wounded Americans. Then he looked at the German prisoner, still lying untreated on the stretcher. The tent went completely still. Patton walked slowly through the center aisle between the cots. He stopped beside the discarded German field dressing, still lying on the floor. Blood had dried dark brown across the fabric. No one bent to pick it up. The German prisoner breathed in short bursts through clenched teeth. One American soldier nearby watched from his cot with bandages covering both eyes. Patton said nothing at first. Margaret Hale stepped forward before anyone else could speak. "Sir," she said, Americans were bleeding out in this tent all night. Patton looked at the wounded men around him. I can see that. Nobody moved. Rain tapped softly against the canvas overhead. Hale kept speaking. We lost 8 men before sunrise, she said. 1 died, while I held his throat closed with my hand. A medic near the entrance lowered his eyes towards the floorboards. Patton looked back at the German prisoner. And now you leave this one here to bleed slower. Hale folded both arms tightly across her chest. He wore the same uniform. Patton bent down and picked the blood-covered field dressing off the floor himself. He turned it over once in his hands before speaking again. Mercy, given to friends, costs nothing, he said. Mercy, given to enemies, is the only kind that means a damn thing. The room stayed silent. Patton held the bandage between 2 fingers. The moment American medics choose who deserves treatment, he said, this army stops being an army and becomes a mob with rifles. Hale's hand stopped moving completely. One surgeon, beside the operating table, removed his glasses and wiped them against his sleeve without saying a word. Patton stepped closer to Hale. His voice stayed low, barely above a whisper. You think helping him dishonors your dead boys? He looked towards the American cots behind her. It honors them because they fought for something larger than revenge. Nobody interrupted him. Patton glanced toward Major Green. How long until this prisoner dies? Minutes. Sir. Patton nodded once, then stopped wasting them. Haley looked down at the bloody dressing in Patton's hand. Her jaw tightened for several seconds. Then she reached forward and took the bandage from him without another word. Patton stepped aside immediately. No lecture. No arrest. No humiliation. Hale crossed to the stretcher and cut open the remaining fabric around the prisoner's wound. 2 medics moved beside her almost instantly. One hung fresh plasma. Another prepared surgical clamps beside the operating table. The German prisoner coughed once and grabbed weakly at the blanket. Patton watched the room for several seconds. Then he pointed toward the treatment board hanging near the entrance. From this hour forward, he said, every surrendered prisoner gets the same chance to live as the man who captured him. Major Green nodded and wrote the order down immediately. Patton turned towards the tent entrance. Rain light spilled across the floorboards behind him. Then he stopped one final time without facing the room. A pint of sweat saves a gallon of blood, he said coldly. Hatred saves nothing. He walked out into the rain. For the next 48 hours, every evacuation hospital attached to Third Army received a rewritten prisoner treatment directive. Corps inspectors visited 11 field stations across the Aachen sector. Medics treated surrendered German prisoners beside American infantrymen under the same canvas roofs. Margaret Hale stayed at the hospital near Aachen. 3 days later, witnesses watched her change bandages on another captured German soldier without being ordered. Years later, Lieutenant James Walker later said, nobody in that tent forgot the silence before Patton picked the bandage off the floor. Patton never mentioned the incident publicly. In his diary, he wrote only one line. Discipline dies one exception at a time. War forces people into impossible choices. The nurse saw dead American boys carried into her tent for 18 straight hours. Patton saw something larger moving beneath the moment. If one prisoner could be denied treatment because of hatred, another could be denied because of fear, then another because of revenge. Both sides carried their own logic. Both paid for it differently. Would you have treated the German prisoner immediately, or waited until every wounded American soldier received care first? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about the moments where morality and war collided under General Patton, make sure to subscribe.